Now the brother of Martha and Mary from Bethany was sick. This was the same Mary who anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent someone to tell Jesus, Lord, your dear friend Lazarus is sick. His sickness is not to face death, but to face the glory of God, triumph over and above death. And the Son of God will be glorified because of that. Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. After he heard of Lazarus's sickness, he did not go immediately, but remained where he was for another 2 days. Then he said to his disciples, Let's go into Judea again. His disciples were surprised. But Master, we've just come from there, and the Jews wanted to stone you. Now you want to go there again? Jesus replied, Are there not 12 hours in the day? To walk in the light of day is to walk freely without obstruction. But someone who walks in the night would stumble because there is no enlightenment in him. Having said this, he added, Our friend Lazarus is not dead, but sleeps, and I am going to wake him up out of his sleep. His disciples responded with, But Lord, if he is only sleeping, he should be okay. Yet Jesus meant that his death was nothing more than being asleep, but they thought that he meant that he was just taking a rest in a deep sleep. So Jesus said it plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sakes I am glad that I wasn't there, so that you may believe. Nevertheless, let's go to him. Then Thomas said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, so that we may die with him. When Jesus arrived, Lazarus was already in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was only about 2 miles from Jerusalem. Many Jews came to comfort the two sisters. Martha immediately went out to meet Jesus when she heard of his arrival, while Mary was waiting in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here earlier, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, whatsoever you would ask of God, he will give it to you. Jesus said to her, Your brother shall rise again. Martha said, Yes, I know that he shall rise again in the conclusion of time. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me shall live even though he died. And whoever is alive in the life that I am shall never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was destined to come into the world. Martha then called Mary secretly away from the attention of the mourners, saying, The Lord is here, and he wants to tell you something. Mary immediately jumped up and went out quickly to meet him. Jesus was not yet in the town where they lived, but waited in the place where Martha met with him. The Jews who had come from Jerusalem to console her saw her getting up quickly to leave the house. They thought that she was going to weep at the grave, so they followed her. When Mary came to the place where Jesus was waiting for her, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if only you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and also the Jews mourning with her, he groaned in his spirit and was deeply moved. He asked, Where is the tomb? They said, Lord, come and we'll show you. Jesus wept. The Jews remarked, He really loved him very much. Some of them reasoned, Why could this man who opened the blind eyes of a stranger not prevent his friend's death? Jesus again groaned in himself as he arrived at the grave. It was a cave with a stone upon its opening. Then Jesus asked for the stone to be taken away. Martha warned that by this time there would be a stench, since it was already 4 days since he passed away. Jesus answered, Did I not tell you that in your believing you see the glory of God?" Then they removed the stone from the cave where the dead was laid. Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I am persuaded that you always hear me, but I am saying this for the sake of those who are standing by, so that they too may come to believe that you sent me." And after he spoke these words, he raised his voice and hollered, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man appeared with his hands and feet swathed in linen clothes. Also, his face was covered in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unwrap him, and so that he can move around freely." Then many of the Jews who accompanied Mary to the grave believed in him when they witnessed what he just did. But some of them went and reported what had happened to the Pharisees. The chief priests and Pharisees immediately called a council meeting. "What do we do now? For this man is doing many miracles. If we let him alone, everyone will believe in him. Then the Romans will come and dispose us from our land and our national heritage." And one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. If you merely reasoned about this, you would have known that it is to our advantage that one should die instead of an entire nation." This he said without realizing that in the office of the high priest, he was prophesying Jesus' sacrificial death as the scapegoat of the entire nation. And this was not for Israel only, but in Jesus laying down his life as the true shepherd of mankind. He would lead together into one family all the children of God from wherever they have been scattered. Then from that day they took counsel together to put him to death. And so Jesus no longer moved about publicly in Jewish circles. He withdrew into the hill country, bordering the desert, where he remained with his disciples in the village of Ephraim. The Jewish Passover was coming up, and many people were making their way to Jerusalem to participate in the ceremonial purification before the Easter celebrations. Jesus was the topic of conversation among the people in the temple courts. Everyone was curious about his whereabouts and wondered whether he would show up during Passover. The chief priests and Pharisees decreed that anyone with information must disclose it so that they can arrest Jesus.